Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Megan Newton. We are back in good old Blighty today in Stoke-on-Trent. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Welcome back. Today's story takes place in 2019, so it's a relatively new case, and it was a recommendation from a subscriber, loving that. Also, what was my other point? Oh, Stoke-on-Trent. It's in Stoke-on-Trent, which is where Robbie Williams is from. I love Robbie Williams. Yeah. Robbie. Our story is not about Robbie Williams. It is about Megan Newton. She was 18 years old at the time of our story, and she was a bright button. Seems like she lived, breathed... What's that saying? Lived, breathed... I don't even think that's right. Safe, jeez. She was a footy fanatic and she played for the Stoke Town ladies under 18s. Say that quick. And on the weekends, she also coached the under 7s Norton Wanderers. So she, a lot of football going on. She loved it. She was really excited to finish school. She was after a scholarship to an American university. That's what she wanted to do. So she wanted to end up in sports therapy. She was also popular and she had a wide circle of friends, lots of friends, and she was just known as somebody that was very fun. In lots of the pictures, she's got like a really big, lovely smile. She looked so happy. She enjoyed life. She was kind, she was caring, she would do anything for anyone. She was very close with her friends and family, especially her mum. You know that whenever I'm telling you lovely, wonderful things about somebody, that, things do not go well in general after that. On the 19th of April in 2019, Megan had finished her shift. She worked at a fish and chip shop. Very common job to have over here when you are a young person, teenager. I never actually did do that. Worked in supermarkets, pubs. I didn't mind a pub. I liked a pub. Restaurant, bank, boring. That was boring. Yeah, that's not a common young person job. That was me trying to have a career, not the right one. I digress. So Megan finishes her shift at the fish and chip shop at 10:20 thereabouts, and she heads home because she is off on a night out that night. It's a Friday night, I believe, and she's ready for a few drinkies, a couple of pubs, some clubs. 10:20. When I saw that, she's finished work at 10:20 and then she's heading home to go out. I'm like, what? It has been a long time. She gets ready and she is seen on CCTV. There is a lot of CCTV footage in this case. When I say a lot, I mean it's kind of like quite close up and personal, really. Sometimes when you see CCTV in cases, it's very grainy to the point where I'm like, how do you know who that person is? Like, how do they know? Like, that's just blob 1, blob 2, I don't know. But you can really see a lot of detail in the CCTV throughout the case. So she is seen leaving her flat at about 11 p.m. 11 p.m. That's like me having a late night now. Like, oh God, it's 11, quick. Better get up them stairs. I've never been one for being out late. I've told you that before. 12 p.m. No, is it a.m.? Yeah, 12 a.m. 12 in the morning. And I'm done. Pumpkin. No, thank you. Never liked it. But Megan did like it and she was out. She was out, going out. So she left at 11 and went to meet her friends at a pub. She was in really good spirits. She'd been and had a tattoo that day, so she wanted to show off her tattoo to her friends and just have a nice time. And they were out until about 3 a.m. And that is when I believe the clubs and pubs and everything were shutting. And there were a lot of people outside waiting for taxis and stuff to come home. This is where Megan bumped in to an old school friend, Joseph Trevor. She had seen him, she would see him when she was out on the town, because that happens, doesn't it? Like if you all grew up somewhere and you're young, you all kind of tend to go out in the same places. So she would see him now and then. It wasn't like she hadn't seen him since school. But anyway, so they had a little catch up and a little chat, and he was in a bit of a situation. I don't think he had his phone. I think he was in a bit of a mess. He had been on drugs as well as on alcohol. He told Megan this. And she ended up lending him her phone so that he could ring or text friends to see if he could go and stay with them. He knew that if he went home in the state that he was in, his parents would just be like, he would be in big trouble. He was 19 at the time. Still young, isn't it? And he was still living at home. He ends up not having any luck with Megan's phone and trying to ring friends and stuff. He also then tells Megan that he had been actually arrested earlier in the evening. So he really did want to lay low and not go home that evening. He was feeling scared. He'd been arrested because he had been stopped on entry into a club earlier in that evening. He was seen by bouncers putting a small bag into his trousers or hiding a small bag. Turns out that he had a bag of ketamine. So he was taken to the police station. I don't know if he was arrested. He was taken in to the police station. Basically, they removed the drugs. What do you call that? Confiscated the drugs and gave him a slap on the wrist. They let him go. When he had no luck with his mates, Megan said to him, look, just stay at my place. Come and stay at my flat, sleep it off, and your parents will be none the wiser. Just come and stay with me. She was being very kind. So off they go in a taxi, and CCTV shows that they arrive at Megan's flat at 3:45 a.m. "90 minutes later, Trevor is seen leaving Megan's flat. So he leaves once and then he realises that he can't get out of the building without a key fob, like a key card thing. So then he goes back into Megan's flat and then he gets that key card, uses it to leave. Outside, he is seen launching Megan's key card in the car park, just lobbing it basically, just throwing it. Trevor then wanders around for about 15 minutes. He's then seen by a motorist on a bridge above a very busy, like a dual carriageway, a big bridge, high up, looking suspicious. And they feel worried for his safety, so they report this to the police. And the police go along to the bridge and they take him in. He's taken in for a mental health assessment and they deem him to be okay and that he can go home. So they call his dad to come and collect him, who happens to be a police officer. Guess what else? Guess what Mummy does? She's also a police officer. Two things I thought with that. Wow, you're going to get in trouble. You have been at the police station twice within 24 hours and they are police officers. They're going to find out probably about your incident with your old ketamine mate. Naughty boy. So I thought, well, he's going to get in big trouble. And then I thought, cool, imagine that, both your parents being police officers, like the pressure to be good. Because we all, when we're young, make mistakes. I mean, I never took a bag of ketamine into a nightclub, but, we all do things a bit. I did have to go to a police station once because I left my keys. I was a young teenager. I lost my keys, my house keys, and they had a big Winnie the Pooh, story time was safe, just going to go there, a big Winnie the Pooh key ring. And then I was like, and I couldn't find them. And I kept going back into town, wandering around the town where I lived to find my keys. I'd thought, I've left them in the phone box. Not there. And then I saw a police officer. You don't see many bobbies on the beat anymore because of funding cuts and stuff. That I hardly ever see a police officer. Anyhow, that's sad, isn't it, really? Anyhow, there used to be lots of them. What's going on here? And then I saw my Winnie the Pooh key ring hanging off of his belt, but he was talking to a drunkard person. Is that a word? A drunk man. And I, being a young teenager, I was impatient. I was like, can I just get my keys? And he was like, can you wait, please? And I was like, can I please get my keys? And I was like, they're mine. Can I just take them? And he was like, now that you have interrupted me twice, you can come to the police station and get them. So I had to tell my parents that I had to go to the police station and get my keys. Honestly, But, learning curve, don't interrupt. Where was I? Police officer dad takes Trevor home, sleep it off. Meanwhile, a neighbour of Megan's finds her discarded keys in the car park, and they are covered in blood. So that's a bit worrying. And they decide to use the key to go into Megan's flat to see if she is okay. And every single time I read about just Joe Blogs finding a body, it just makes me sad, because it must be something that never, in fact, I do believe the neighbour said it just was something that it haunts them for the rest of your life. And I can imagine that is true, because it's very shocking, isn't it? They use Megan's keys, they go into her flat, and they find Megan's naked body laying on her bed, and she has been stabbed a number of times in her back. The neighbour leaves and immediately calls the police. The autopsy showed that Megan had been strangled for between 15 and 30 seconds. How they work that out, I don't know. That is fascinating. She was then stabbed 9 times in her back, upper back area, and both of her lungs were penetrated by those stab wounds. She had also been R-worded. I'm going to say that. I've got to be careful with what I say, apparently, so I'm going to say that. Like I said, because there was such clear CCTV, it wasn't long in their investigation. It was very, very quick that they determined that Trevor had been the last person to see Megan alive. They had seen him go into her flat and then leave 90 minutes later. Not only that, but the CCTV showed that he had blood on his hands. Word travels fast, doesn't it? It really does. And Trevor got a text message from a friend before the police even arrived at his abode to say that they had found Megan's body. It was, I guess, gossip at the time. And this really panicked Trevor. He was like, okay, this is real. I mean, what did he expect to happen? She was going to be found. So he panics and he texts his mum to say, I've done something bad. Oh, my eyes. My eyes are like the Sahara. They're like the Sahara. Not long, and the police arrive to arrest him. Now, Trevor is 19 at the time of our story. He is also a semi-pro footballer. He was currently studying at college for his A-levels, and he already had a scholarship to an American university. So I do think that the sports, it must be an aspirational thing, and maybe the sports education is like really great over in the US. It sounds like it, because he sounds like that is the place to be for that. So he already had this secured. He did well at school. He got 10 GCSEs. And also, just to say, he grew up in a very normal, it's weird, isn't it? Because we're all different and crazy, but there was no abuse or anything like that. He had a very loving, nurturing, mum and dad as well. Like, they were both police officers. They had respectable jobs. I know that doesn't really mean anything, to be honest, because you could be a police officer, as we know, and be questionable. But yeah, from what I could see, they were just very normal, and he had a very normal, privileged upbringing. In his interview, he says that they had consensual sex. He did go back to her flat, yes, he couldn't deny that. He's on CCTV. He went back, they had consensual sex, and then his mind goes blank. Convenient, isn't it? Always with these things, I don't remember. Oh, good one. He doesn't remember anything, but he goes on to say, I definitely didn't murder her, though. He pleaded not guilty, which meant that this whole thing would go to trial. When the police looked into Trevor in the investigation, they found that there was a bit of a darker side, really. This wasn't the first time that he had been linked to a case involving the R word. When he was 15, he was accused of R-wording a 14-year-old, and he was actually arrested at school in front of all of, the school. That's crazy drama, isn't it? Can you imagine if that happened at your school? Like, what? Nothing came of it. There were no charges made, but it was enough. The accusation was enough, and it was quite strongly believed that he had done what he had done. He was kind of teased for it, and he was given nicknames, and apparently, like, one minute he'd find it funny, and he would be almost like not boastful. What's that word when you're like proud of the accusation? Nice. And then other times, excuse me. Oh. And then other times he would just flip his lid and be really angry, like, oh, shut up, don't call me that. It would seem that he did suffer with depression. And I couldn't get to the bottom of whether that depression had begun before he was 15, when that incident had happened, or afterwards as a result of it. I'm not sure, so I don't know. However, at the time of Megan's murder, he was not a happy bunny, and about a month, I think it was, a few weeks before her murder, he had tried to be unalive at the same bridge that he had been found by the police officers on the night of Megan's murder, or the morning of her murder. So he was troubled. Just had a little thought about that. Come back to it. 10 months later, the trial would commence, and on the first day of the trial, he then pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of R and 1 count of murder, and his story had changed somewhat. He claimed that when they'd got back to Megan's flat, they'd started talking, and this is what he claims. I think it's bull, by the way, but this is what he said. That she said, oh, back in the day, 3 years ago, but back in the day, when that whole situation happened and you were accused of that, I did speak about that, and I did think you'd done it, actually, and I'm really sorry. So he says that she brought it up and that it made him really angry, and the thought of her having agreed that he had done it made him really cross, something like that, and he snapped. The prosecution believed that Megan had no sexual intentions that night when she offered Trevor a place to stay, and that is exactly what it was. He was in need, and she said, crash at mine. They suggest that Trevor had other ideas and that he knew what he wanted and he was out to get it. It was likely that he had tried it on and that she rebuffed his advances, and that made him very angry and led him to do what he did. They suggest that once he had committed the R word, he then realised that he would get in trouble for that and that she would tell. So he had no other choice but to murder her. So he strangled her, and then he went to the kitchen where he got a knife, and then he stabbed her 9 times. And the act of strangulation, it's almost like he couldn't, and then he opted for something else. But that's a lot of thinking time because in that moment, it's not that I condone that at all, but in a moment when something happens and it's in that one moment, it's like, oh, but he got up, he walked to the kitchen, he got a knife. There's a lot of time. I know that it probably is, it's not like a mansion. He didn't walk for 100 miles, but that's a long enough time for your brain to be clicking like, oh, he had lots of time to make other choices, and he didn't. He committed to that. Probably because he just thought, well, there's no other way out. Foolishly. He was found guilty. On the 17th of February 2020, he was sentenced to 21 years. I find that quite lenient myself, because I think that's a very dangerous person there. Somebody that can that's like anger and rage, and then that's how he reacted. He could be free. He's eligible for parole after 21 years. That doesn't mean he will get out. But if he got parole, he could be out when he's 40. Megan's mother was furious. She was very cross with the police as well, because he was arrested that night, or taken into custody that night with ketamine. He was drunk, he was high, Is that what you say if you're on ketamine? I don't know. But, he was on drugs and he was drunk and they let him go. They let him go back out. And she thought that that was lenient. And she thought that the leniency was because mummy and daddy were police officers. And she might be right. And that's very tragic, because if he had been kept in to sleep it off or what have you, then he wouldn't have been there to murder Megan. What do we think? I had a thought and I left it, didn't I? And now I've left it in the past. Maybe if I speak what my thoughts are, it'll come back. First thought, when you see the CCTV footage when they arrive back at Megan's flat, I noticed a couple of things. So I noticed that there was no physical, I think I'm right, there's no physical contact between the two. So it's not, like if you were going to go back, let's say, with someone and you knew that something was going to happen. Like in a movie. It's like, oh, yeah, you're touchy and you're feely with each other, a bit flirtatious, maybe like not necessarily ravishing each other, but you might hold a hand or like be flirtatious. That's the word I'm looking for. Likely, it's quite a big hallway. They've walked in. She looks animated and happy, but she looks friend-like. She doesn't look like she's flirting with him. She's not touched him in any way, and he hasn't either. And at one point when she's opening the door, he is right behind her, and it's prime for if you are going to, if you're both of you know that there's going to be something that occurs beyond that door, perfect time for a bit of a touch or whatever, and that doesn't happen. And in my head, I'm like, okay, this just looks like she's just chatting to him and they've come back and he's going to stay at her place. That's what it looks like. It does not look like two people about to go in and, get down. It doesn't look like that to me. Also, when he stands behind her as she's opening the door, it's kind of like it broke my heart because he looks like a predator. It looks like someone that's got their prey, and it looks like he knows what he's going to do. And I find that heartbreaking and sad that her parents have seen that too, knowing what he goes on to do. And then he looks around, like he susses it out. And again, if you're going in to someone's flat and you're like, you only have eyes for them, he'd be like looking at her longingly, he might touch her, blah blah blah. You certainly wouldn't be like, what's going on over here, how many flats are there, like what, he wouldn't be doing that. And it looks very much like he's scouting it out, in my opinion. Tell me what you think, but that's what it looks like to me. And it looks and it feels very predatorish. Maybe because we know what happens. Maybe we put that onto what we see. But in my head, that's what I thought. Trying desperately to remember what my thought was. Bear with me. I feel like that's going to drive me mad. When I do the edit, I'm going to be like, oh yes. So what I might do, because it's falling out of my brain, I might just do a screen and quickly write in what my thought was about it. Not that it was probably all that interesting, but it might be. Anyway, it's so that it's on the it's just there. It's so annoying. Oh my gosh. Anyway, that is all I have on today's case. It is a troublesome case for me because I do think that while I don't think that he was like a serial, like sometimes someone is arrested and they've they've committed one murder, or maybe, like one, and you think you would have carried on, and that was gonna, like, you can see the MO that they would have adopted, and you just think you were going to be a serial killer 100%. I don't think the same with this guy, but I do feel like it's still dangerous to have somebody that can react that way. Do you know what I mean? And I find it really hard because he was obviously troubled. I've got my thought. Oh, yes. So, I was going to say this, right? If he was, I thought to myself, I wonder, I will get the thought out in a minute. Keeping you on your toes. it's not that great anyway. But I thought, the depression, and when he wanted to be unalive a couple of weeks before Meghan's murder, I wondered whether, was he genuinely innocent of what happened when he was 15, the R-word incident? Was he innocent? In which case, that would explain, if you were innocent of something like that and you were being accused, that would be so much turmoil. And I really feel for men when that does happen, and it does happen. It breaks their world apart. They lose their jobs, sometimes like their wives, their girlfriends, their families. It can rip someone apart if it is incorrect and not right. And it's so difficult, isn't it? So I thought to myself, I wonder if he was innocent of that, actually. And in which case it would make you depressed, knowing that everybody thinks that you did something awful like that. It would make you depressed. And I guess we don't know, but if he did. But I then thought the opposite, because I thought, well, actually, if you were innocent of that and it made you depressed, I highly doubt the next thing that you're going to go and do is, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, no. If you were depressed because somebody thought that you'd done something so horrific, you're not going to go out and do that horrific thing. I don't believe. So I think he, again, this is just my thoughts and speculation. I think he was guilty of the previous thing, and the depression might have just been something that either was there before, or perhaps, it's not nice being caught out on something. He might have thought he was going to get away with that, and then all of a sudden you're the centre of attention. You probably didn't want that. It's horrible anyway, even if you did do the deed, everyone knowing. It's a bit like, no one wants to be caught for anything, do they? And have to deal with the judgment of it. Yeah. So actually, I rethought it and thought, no, I think he did do it. I think he just couldn't handle, that thing when you do something, people do bad things and then they can't handle the heat. Well, part of the punishment, isn't it? Anyhow, I am going to love and leave you. Please give me some more case suggestions. I've really liked having case suggestions. It's lovely doing a case that somebody has requested. I like it because I know that someone has asked for it and I'm doing it for them. No pressure though. Oh, pardon me. I have had a much better week with, I'm used to the specs now. Oh, hope you all had a nice Valentine's Day if you celebrate it. It's half term here, which is nice. We're going to go away at the end of the week, which is lovely. It's been nice to squirrel myself away actually for a little bit of time. I'm an introvert and I do like my peace and my space. I like being on my own quite a lot. And so when the holidays come along, I'm patient with it because it's not their fault, is it? But I do get to a point where I'm just a bit, I have to really adjust. Like my hearing, I'm like, what? I'm going to be deaf by the end of this week. I think that every single time. And, it's just a lot going on in my face all the time. So it's nice to come up the shed and have a little bit of space from that, because much as I love them, I do struggle with the what? I'm going to go because it is half term and we're going to go to the park and we're going to buy a cake and we're going to see some friends. So that'd be nice. Be nice. Right, I love you. I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful weekend and be good if you want to. Bye.